I have to say I'm kind of fallen into kind of a minority of a group of people who um, have really kind of explored that history of Western New York. I have just because it's where I'm from. It's kind of the topic of choice for me, and so I've tried to consume everything that I can on the history and the peoples of New York State. Originally, I would say my focus was on indigenous communities, but over time I've realized that a lot of the stuff that I've been engaged in is actually revolves around the complex interpersonal relationships between different peoples. So prior to the Europeans, it was always between other indigenous communities, and then with subsequent colonization of the Americas, it increasingly became more and more Haudenosaunee and European peoples. And so it dawned on me that's actually what I was studying, and so I actually find a great interest in that. And so I do feel like I fall into a minority of folks who kind of know that history. For me, over time, I have relied on a great number of scholars who have done their own fair share of history. And I would have to say that my own knowledge base of the Buffalo and Erie Canal history really stems to doctors Lawrence Hopman and Alyssa Mount Pleasant. They have done substantial research, and they have led me, to a lot of the archives that house these materials. And it's quite a story, and I wish more people knew it. And unfortunately, with public education, with all of the needs of education today, it's really difficult for people to spend any substantial amount of time on any subject or topic. And so as a result, some of the older events in New York or even Buffalo history gets kind of pushed to the back burner. And so with working with the Buffalo History Museum, I thought it was a great opportunity to work with a Buffalo area organization and talk about that history. And I have to give my deep, heartfelt thanks to the Buffalo Maritime Center and Brian Treziak and all of those folks. It's been a wonderful experience. And once again, it's a moment where indigenous communities and their partners are coming together to make a historical moment. Yeah, so in this part of New York State, I'm just going to call it, Western New York, and that's everything west of the Genesee River, in my opinion. And so this area of New York State, there's a lot of known history going back to early European visitation to the region. And a lot of it actually coincides with Haudenosaunee oral history of what happens as well. And so it does make for a wonderful tale of a lot of expansion and contraction of numerous indigenous communities in Western New York over the last 500 years. And the last big group of people to kind of have control over the region has been the Onondaga or the Seneca peoples. And they were the last ones to hold on to the title of this region until it was acquired by the United States. Knowing that history and watching it change hands over time, I'm always amazed by no matter who claims the region to be theirs, everyone is incorporating the previous peoples who are still living in situ, but they're also inhabiting the same locations and same former city centers of times past. And if you know anything about the highways of the northeast of New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, Buffalo Creek or Buffalo is along two major routes, a north-south one, but also an east-west one. And so the area has always been inhabited. Over time, the modern day Seneca even established themselves in the South Towns, which was a Kakwa mound site. And they built, their present day Seneca community right on top of that site. So people have always been drawn to the area. And I think it's always been based on ancestral connection to the region. These are known locations. I'm from Niagara Falls. And simply by being, from the region, my mom is from the Falls and my dad is from Tuscarora. And just both of their stories, their family stories to the region has always been a deep interest to me. So I have always studied local history, or what people would deem local history in this part of the world. But it's really one for me that really has made me realize how much we are really part of the landscape, all of us, and we all have a part in this story that's being told, or what was made 300 years ago, 200 years ago, even 100 years ago. I'm always diving into the archives and the stuff that I find. It's really amazing, and I want more people to know about this stuff. I don't want people to forget about it. It's important because it really does tell us where we're from and where we could be possibly headed. And, it's not a doomsayer or anything. It's just, there's lessons to be learned, and then sometimes I see us repeating those same mistakes, and I think they can be prevented. And a story like the Erie Canal and its impact on Western New York can have a lot of implications on the future of the region. Yes. The presence of Haudenosaunee people in Buffalo really does tell a story of erasure. As I do my deep dives into the archives, newspaper stories, popular stories, even just family stories that I hear from people that I meet, or even stories from my own family, you do see that indigenous people have always been part of the region. Even though we are told this narrative that, they left the region, they gave up their lands, and they moved to reserve lands, and that's where they've been quietly been since. And I think a lot of my forebears at the museum, but also, in universities, on the street, people who have audiences that they speak to, talk about that presence that's always been there.